I'm back again. Okay, we're reading Max Licado's book, He Still Moves Stones. Everyone needs a miracle. He still moves stones. I wanted to read this one because it's Lent and because all my Dr. Seuss books are from Christmas. Oh, can't see that sun out there? It's first day of spring. Happy first day of spring. My brother would have been celebrating his birthday, but he's celebrating in heaven now. Happy birthday, John. He died in 1995 of spinal meningitis. It went real quick, just 2 hours. He only knew he was sick for 2 hours and he was gone. That's a nasty disease. Okay, he still moves stones. And chapter 2, not guilty, overcoming shame. Okay. Jesus went to the Mount of Olives, but early in the morning he went back to the temple. This, by the way, is a verse, John 8, verse 1 through 11. And all the people came to him, and he sat and he taught them. The teachers of the law and the Pharisees brought a woman who had been caught in adultery. They forced her to stand before the people. They said to Jesus, "Teacher, this woman was caught having sexual relations with a man who is not her husband. The law of Moses commands that we stone to death every woman who does this. What do you say we should do?" They were asking this to trick Jesus so that they could have some charge against him. But Jesus bent over and started writing on the ground with his finger. When they continued to ask Jesus their question, he raised up and said, "Anyone here who has never sinned can throw the first stone at her." Then Jesus bent over again and wrote on the ground. Those who heard Jesus began to leave one by one, first the older men and then the others. Jesus was left there alone with the woman standing before him. Jesus raised up again and asked her, "Woman, where are they? Has no one judged you guilty?" She answered, "No one, sir." Then Jesus said, "I also don't judge you guilty. You may go now, but don't sin anymore." That's the part everybody forgets. He forgets her. He sends her on his way forgiven. But he says, "But don't sin anymore." That's the part everybody wants to forget, I suppose. John 8, verse 11. I also don't judge you guilty. Rebecca Thompson fell twice from the Fremont Canyon Bridge. She died both times. The first fall broke her heart, the second broke her neck. She was only 18 years of age when she and her 11-year-old sister were abducted by a pair of hoodlums near a store in Casper, Wyoming. They drove the girls 40 miles southwest of the Fremont Canyon Bridge, a one-lane steel beam structure rising 112 feet above the North Platte River. That's kind of high. The men brutally beat and raped Rebecca. She somehow convinced them not to do the same to her sister, Amy. Both were thrown over the bridge into the narrow gorge. Amy died when she landed on a rock near the river. But Rebecca slammed into a ledge and was ricocheted into deeper water, with a hip fractured in 5 places. She struggled to the shore. To protect her body from the cold, she wedged herself between 2 rocks and waited until the dawn. But the dawn never came for Rebecca. Oh, the sun came up and she was found. The physicians treated her wounds and the courts imprisoned her attackers. Life continued, but the dawn never came. The blackness of her night of horrors lingered. She was never able to climb out of that canyon. So in September 1992, 19 years later, she returned to the bridge. Against her boyfriend's pleading, she drove 70 miles per hour to the North Platte River with her 2-year-old daughter and boyfriend at her side. She sat on the edge of the Fremont Canyon Bridge and wept. Through her tears, she retold the story. The boyfriend didn't want the child to see her mother cry, so he carried the toddler to the car. That's when he heard her body hit the water. That's when Rebecca Thompson died, her second death. The sun never dawned on Rebecca's dark night. Why? What eclipsed the light from her world? Fear, perhaps. She had testified against the men, pointing them out in the courtroom. One of the murderers had taunted her by smirking and sliding his finger across his throat. On the day of her death, the two had been up for parole. Perhaps the fear of a second encounter was too great. Was it anger? Anger at a rapist? Anger at the parole board? Anger at herself for thousands falls in thousands nightmares that followed? Oh. Or anger at God for a canyon that grew ever deeper and a night that grew ever blacker and a dawn that never came? Was it guilt? Some think so. Despite Rebecca's attractive smile and appealing personality, friends say that she struggled with the ugly fact that she had survived and her little sister had not. She'd not been able to protect her little sister. Was it shame? Everyone she knew and thousands she didn't had heard the humiliating details of her tragedy. The stigma was tattooed deeper with the newspaper ink of every headline. She had been raped. She had been violated. She had been shamed. And try as she might to outlive and outrun the memory, she never could. So 19 years later, she went back to the bridge. Canyons of shame run deep, gorges of never-ending guilt, walls ribboned with the greens and grays of death, unending echoes of screams. Put your hands over your ears, splash water on your face, stop looking over your shoulder. Try as you might to outrun yesterday's tragedies. Their tentacles are longer than your hope. They draw you back to the bridge of sorrows to be shamed again and again and again. If it was your fault, it would be different. If you were to blame, you could apologize. If the tumble into the canyon was your mistake, you could respond, but you weren't a volunteer. You were a victim. Sometimes your shame is private, pushed over the edge by an abusive spouse, molested by a perverted parent, seduced by a compromising superior. No one else knows, but you know, and that's enough. Sometimes it's public. Branded by a divorce you didn't want, contaminated by a disease you never expected, marked by a handicap you didn't create, whether it is actually in their eyes or just in your imagination. You have to deal with it. You are marked, a divorcee, an invalid, an orphan, an AIDS patient. Whether private or public, shame is always painful, and unless you deal with it, it is permanent. Unless you get help, the dawn will never come. You're not surprised when I say there are Rebecca Thompsons in every city and Fremont Bridges in every town. We have one. We have a Fremont Bridge in Wisconsin. And there are many Rebecca Thompsons in the Bible, so many, in fact, that it almost seems that the pages of Scripture are stitched together with their stories. You've met many in this book, each acquainted with the hard floor of the Canyon of Shame. But there is one woman whose stories embodies them all, a story of failure, a story of abuse, a story of shame, a story of grace. That's her. Standing in the center of the circle, those men around her are religious leaders. Pharisees, they are called. The self-righteous, self-appointed custodians of conduct. And the other man, the one in the simple clothes, the one sitting on the ground, the one looking at the face of the woman, that's Jesus. And I always wondered, geez, where's the man that she supposedly committed adultery with? Shouldn't he be there? Stoned too? Jesus has been teaching, the woman has been cheating, and the Pharisees are out to stop them both. Teacher, this woman was caught in the act of adultery. The accusation rings off the courtyard walls. Caught in the act of adultery. The words alone are enough to make you blush. Door slammed open, covers jerked back. In the act, in the arms, in the moment, in the embrace. Caught. Aha! What have we here? This man is not your husband. Put on some clothes. We know what to do with women like you. In an instant, she is yanked from private passion to public spectacle. Heads poke out of windows as the posse pushes her through the streets. Dogs bark, neighbors turn, the city sees. Clutching a thin robe around her shoulders, she hides her nakedness, but nothing can hide her shame. From this second on, she will be known as an adulteress. When she goes to the market, women will whisper. When she passes, heads will turn. When her name is mentioned, the people will remember. Moral failure finds easy recall. The greater travesty, however, goes unnoticed. What the woman did is shameful, but what the Pharisees did is despicable. According to the law, adultery was punishable by death, but only if 2 people witnessed the act. There had to be 2 eyewitnesses. How likely are 2 people to be eyewitnesses to adultery? What are the chances of 2 people stumbling upon an early morning flurry of forbidden embraces? Unlikely, but if you do, odds are it's not a coincidence. So we wonder, how long did the men peer through the window before they barged in? How long did they lurk behind the curtain before they stepped out? And what of the man? Adultery requires 2 participants. What happened to him? Could it be that he slipped out? The evidence leaves little doubt. It was a trap. She's been caught, but she'll soon see that she is not the catch. She is only the bait. The law of Moses commands that we stone to death every woman who does this. What do you say we should do? Pretty cocky, this committee of high ethics. Pretty proud of themselves, these agents of righteousness. This will be a moment they long remember, the morning they foil and snag the mighty Nazarene. As for the woman, why, she's immaterial, merely a pawn in their game. Her future, it's unimportant. Her reputation, who cares if it's ruined? She is a necessary yet dispensable part of their plan. The woman stares at the ground. Her sweaty hair dangles. Her tears drip hot with hurt. Her lips are tight. Her jaw is clenched. She knows she's been framed. No need to look up. She'll find no kindness. She looks at the stones in their hands, squeezed so tightly that fingertips turn white. She thinks of running, but where? She could claim mistreatment, but to whom? She could deny the act, but she was seen. She could beg for mercy, but these men offer none. The woman has nowhere to turn. You'd expect Jesus to stand and proclaim judgment on the hypocrites, but he doesn't. You'd hope that he would snatch the woman and the 2 would be beamed to Galilee. Beam me up, Scotty. That's not what happens either. You'd imagine that an angel would descend or heaven would speak or the earth would shake. Nope, none of that. Once again, his move is subtle, but once again, his message is unmistakable. What does Jesus do? If you already know, pretend you don't and feel the surprise. Jesus writes in the sand. He stoops down and he draws in the dirt the same finger that engraved the commandments on Sinai's peak and seared the warning on Belshazzar's wall, now scribbles in the courtyard floor. And as he writes, he speaks, anyone here who has never sinned can throw the first stone at her. The young look to the old look in their hearts. They are the first to drop their stones, and as they turn to leave, the young who were cocky with borrowed convictions do the same. The only sound is the thud of rocks and the shuffle of feet. Jesus and the woman are left alone. With the jury gone, the courtroom becomes the judge's chambers, and the woman awaits his verdict. Surely a sermon is brewing. No doubt he's going to demand that I apologize, but the judge doesn't speak. His head is down. Perhaps he's still writing in the sand. He seems surprised when he realized that she's still there. Woman, where are they? Has no one judged you guilty? She answers, no one, sir. Then Jesus says, I also don't judge you guilty. You may go now, but don't sin anymore. If you have wondered how God reacts when you fail, frame these words and hang them on the wall. Read them, ponder them, drink from them, stand below them, and let them wash over your soul. Or better still, take them with you to your canyon of shame. Invite Christ to your journey with you back to the Fremont Bridge of your world. Let him stand beside you as you retell the events of the darkest night of your soul. And then listen carefully. He's speaking. I don't judge you guilty. And watch carefully. He's writing. He's leaving a message, not in the sand, but on a cross, not with his hand, but with his blood. His message has 2 words. Not guilty. Or one word. Forgiven. I think that was a good one. Next story is going to be Don't Miss the Party, The Dungeon of the Bitter. Chapter 3. Don't miss the party. I'm going to see you. Ending the stream right now. Bye-bye. God bless.